How about you? Did you get one?
No, I'm good.
Ask the biggest question in life. What do you think the biggest question is? I know you probably got places to be, but I'm Todd.
I'm Brody.
Brody?
Yep.
Yep. So what's Brody's idea of the biggest question in life? Besides, when am I going to eat lunch? Right now, for me, it's
my life.
So what's Brody's plans for his life?
I don't have one.
You don't have a plan? No? What are you studying?
Just my generals.
Yeah. You got plans for college after this? Like go on to a bigger
Not
university?
yet.
No? So are you post-secondary student or?
I was last year, and this is gonna be my second year.
Second
So
year,
I'm
sorry.
just
So you're
normal student now.
Normal student. So what does Brody think happens to people when they die?
Nothing.
Nothing? So would you consider yourself an atheist or an agnostic? Atheist. So how did Brody come to that conclusion in life?
Well, I thought about heaven. How when you die, you go to heaven and you live forever in heaven, right?
Yep.
And I thought that just didn't seem right to me, living forever, watching everyone you love die, and then it all happens again.
So you think you had this belief that when you died, you went to heaven, watched other people you loved suffer, and then they died, and then there was kind of this reincarnation thing where the process started all over again. Was that kind of just something you settled on your own, or through studying?
Well, I just believe that heaven is endless, and that would be torture to me.
I could understand why you would feel that way if you have and I don't mean this in an aggressive tone at all. If you have kind of a confused idea of what heaven is, it would seem that way because heaven sounds, if your idea of heaven is what a lot of people always picture, like in the cartoons and the funny movies, heaven's like a bunch of clouds and fluffy clouds and people just laying around and doing kind of nothing but lounging for the whole day, that would be boring. The Christian perspective of heaven isn't legitimately like that. So if you've had some encounters with Christians and that was kind of the idea that was given to you about heaven, then on behalf of genuine Christianity, I want to apologize. But so as an atheist, right? Or would you say agnostic?
Atheist.
Atheist. So you're absolutely convinced there is no God. So in asking that question, let me ask you this. Hey, how are you?
Not too bad. How are you doing today?
Good. How do I want to phrase this? You look like a thinker, so I'm going to try and challenge you. Is that a fair assumption? As an atheist, what is your source for right and wrong? Notice I didn't say good or evil. I said right and wrong.
Just my own personal beliefs.
Okay. So Brody can determine for Brody what's right and wrong. So, and I'm not going to do this, but let's say you have a wallet and I walk up, punch you, and take it. Is that wrong?
Yeah.
Why?
It's mine.
Okay. But what if my personal, and they're not, I don't really believe Todd does not think that, all right? I promise you, Brody, I'm not going to do that, but would it be fair to say then, based on your worldview, if every person subjectively determines for themselves what is right and wrong, I could then legitimately say, well, it's right for me, you have it, I want it, I'm going to take it.
I guess you could,
But it wouldn't be right, would it?
no.
So it's not really subjective based on each person, is it? So would you say then society shapes our views of right and wrong?
For the most part.
For the most part. So what about when society gets it wrong?
I think they get it wrong most of the time.
Right. Society. So if society gets it wrong most of the time, how do we determine they're wrong?
I don't know.
It's hard, isn't it? Because everybody's going to have a different subjective presupposition about what is right and wrong if they're left to their own devices. So what if I told you, and this is where it's going to get radical for you, right? What if I told you that you recognize right and wrong not because of your own subjective thought process, but because we have a eternal, external moral standard that dictates to us that we know what is right and wrong, and that's naturally part of who we are, being made in the image of God, and that people rebel against that and try to determine for themselves, because even though nature proves there's a God, we want to ignore him. What would you say to that?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure? So you're not really an atheist then. You're more of an agnostic.
Sure.
Sure. Are you bored? Are you thinking? Did I got you thinking a little bit?
A little bit.
A little bit. So the reason that I ask those questions is because, and this is going to sound funny. You know, what are you, 19?
Oh yeah.
Almost. You're 18. You've probably never heard this from a complete stranger, let alone a almost 47-year-old guy. I ask these kind of questions because I love humanity. I love people. I love you as an individual because, like me, I recognize that you're made in the image of God. And if I recognize that you're made in the image of God, then would it be easier if I shifted? There. Is that better?
A little bit.
So, because I recognize that you're made in the image of God, I want what's best for you. And what's best for you isn't necessarily just that you have a lot of comfort and be happy here on earth, and then you die and you wink out of existence, but for you to come to know God through the Savior Jesus Christ. And you're gonna say, well, but there's no proof, right? And I understand that. I get that. I had these conversations. You wouldn't believe the number of times I have these conversations. But what you're longing for isn't proof. You're just longing for freedom. And the problem is nobody's truly free, because we're all slaves to something. We're either slaves to our own selfish desires, or are slaves to a desire to look good in other people's eyes by doing ostensibly good things, or in the case of Christians, it's a slavery to God, which is not a bad slavery. You know, it's beautiful, because we're freely able to worship him, and we're able to know that this life, even though it's brief, even if you live 100 years, when you think about it, people who live to be 100 years old, they're really not living all that long in the grand scheme of things, especially if you come from the perspective. Did you get one of these?
No. What is it?
It's just a DVD that asks the biggest question.
Okay.
Have a good day. Sorry about that. So my goal is to get them all out today. I've got more, but so what I'm pushing at, Brody, is and there again, you're free to walk away using the term freedom. What I'm pushing at is, you have a bit of a I don't want to say excuse. Because I don't want to make it too harsh or hostile. But you're pushing back against God because you don't like what you've been told reality is from a Christian perspective, and what heaven is. And what I would tell you about that is don't blame God for either your own misconceptions of what heaven are, or what people have told you about God. And here's the amazing thing about it. Brody, you don't have to work to earn God's favor. You don't have to do anything to please him, because what the truth is, left to our own devices, nothing we do pleases God. And I know that sounds like horrible, because everybody talks about God being this big loving father up in, the sky daddy, I've heard people refer to him as, in a derogatory way, but he is a loving father. But like any father, he has standards of behavior for his children. And in the case of his created beings, and chiefly those he's made in his image, which are humans, his standards are to keep his eternal moral law. And even though he knows we cannot do that, he's provided a way out for us. I mean, it's wrong to lie, right? Mm-hmm. Right? It's wrong to steal. We just kind of had that conversation, and it's wrong to murder. And so kind of me hitting you and taking your wallet is, in God's eyes, is a form of murder. Not only is it theft, but it's a form of murder. And we know all of those things, but the issue is, it's not wrong just because God says don't do it. It's wrong because God has made us in his image. And he himself does not murder. He himself does not lie. He himself does not commit adultery. You know, all those things that we've done. Because I guarantee you, you've thought a lustful thought at some point in your life about somebody that you shouldn't. And I know that because I'm a red-blooded American male. So even if it's... have a good day, John. It's good to see you again.
Good afternoon.
Even though it's... in our society today, that lustful thought can track after anybody, male, female, you know, it doesn't matter. But we're just not allowed to think those thoughts because God says, I don't do that, so you shouldn't do that. But even though we can't keep that law, he's provided a way out. How much of a Christian background do you have? Were you raised going to church?
Yeah, I was born Lutheran. I had to go to confirmation.
Okay. And so was I. I was raised Lutheran. It was funny, I couldn't stand anything about being a Lutheran until after I got out of high school, got out of college, and was later on in my life, and then became not Lutheran and started to really appreciate the teachings of Luther, not necessarily just of the Lutheran Church, but the teachings of Luther. So he had some really profound things to say, and one of the books that he wrote was called The Bondage of the Will. And in that book, he talks about how mankind is enslaved to their will. Now, it sounds like that's freedom, but it's not, because all that the human will really wants to do is please itself. And sometimes that pleasing itself comes at the expense of other people. And that's a huge thing. But God, recognizing that as part of his knowledge and omniscience, God has sent his son to do what we could not do, and that was to live perfectly for 33 years and do everything that you can't. In which I know you've heard this before, having been raised Lutheran and gone through confirmation. So the amazing thing about that is, though, is then what he does is he tells us, in his love for us, having crushed his son under his wrath on the cross, he says, now repent and believe. Because that's what's really standing between you knowing your purpose in life and knowing what you're going to do, is because you're rejecting God. And that makes it's really hard for anybody who's rejecting God to really ever come to any solid conclusion about what the meaning of life is. Because you're always going to be pursuing other things, the next thing. And God isn't just there to fix that so that now you're not pursuing things, but it changes your focus and you realize that the purpose of life is to glorify. We did it again, didn't we? The purpose of life is to not focus on you, it's now to focus on God. And that's what makes heaven amazing. It's not fluffy clouds, people sitting around with angel wings and halos playing harps. Harp music's boring. I'm a church guy and I can't stand harp music. But heaven is glorious. Heaven is heaven, not because of where you are, but who's there. And heaven is amazing and heaven is glorious because God is there. And that's what makes it so powerful. And I know that you're kind of tilting and leaning in that atheist agnostic direction, but I would really challenge you to... Do you have a Bible at home?
Yeah.
I would challenge you to read Romans chapter 1. And the reason I do that, especially the last half, the reason I say that... can I read it to you real quick?
I gotta get going.
Okay. But the reason I would challenge you to do that, because it addresses where you're at right now. It addresses where you are in your rejection of the idea of there being a God, and it answers the question of how do I come to know him? Because the longer you reject him, the more hardened you're going to be to the truth. Does any of that make sense? I mean, I know you don't agree, but recognize your presupposition in that, okay, there is no God, so therefore none of this matters. Because if there's no God, nothing that you determine to be good or right matters. I mean, think about that. Because then everybody can do what's right in their own eyes, and God talks about that. Whatever's right in your own eyes, you can do. What would the world be like if everybody lived that way? It'd be chaos, wouldn't it? And as bad as things can be today, imagine how much worse it would be. Imagine the racial tension. Imagine the ethnic tension. Imagine just the hatred and the murder and the whatnot would be pouring out of people if we didn't have God's gracious restrictions on us that keep people from being as bad as they could be. So think about that and watch that. And if you see me around, say hi, all right? I appreciate your patience in listening to me.
Have a good day.
You have a good day. Thanks. Hi. Did I give you one of these yet? Did I?
Yesterday.
Oh, okay. You have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
And I know I gave you one already. How are you? What do you... Oh, are you in the art class that's doing the collages?
Yeah.
Yeah, what'd you do?
Just some random things.
Random things? Well, that's kind of unique. Who
Yeah.
who was your inspiration for this one?
Just mainly how music is, I have artists and they talk about cars, just
Cool.
all that stuff.
Well, I talked to another gal who's doing the same thing. You have a good day.
You too.
You get one of these yet?
What is it?
It's a DVD that asks the biggest question in life.
Okay.
Perfectly free. No strings attached.
Alright, thank you.
Have a good day.
Yeah.